Hello and welcome to Politics Today. In this programme today we'll be posing the question, is our state education system failing our Christian children? And in today's programme I'm joined by Sid Caudle, leader of the Christian Parties Alliance, and also David Hughes from Prayer for Parliament. So gentlemen, welcome to the programme. I'll start off with you, Sid, because clearly today we're discussing the issue of education and the fact that now there are over 50,000 home ed children now that have pulled out of state schools because they're concerned about the national curriculum, they're concerned about the alienation that many Christian children are facing at schools. Can you enlighten us into what's happening and why we're seeing such a move towards homeschooling?
Yes, well, it's very interesting that obviously as society is changing, so the whole liberal agenda is starting to hit our schools. When they introduced same-sex marriage, our biggest concern was, what are we now going to teach in schools? Because before same-sex marriage was introduced in 2013, marriage was taught in schools as a relationship between a man and a woman. Children are told, when you grow up, a boy will get married to a girl, a man will get married to a woman, and you'll have a family and you'll have children and so on and so forth. But once same-sex marriage was introduced, suddenly you're no longer telling children, when you grow up, a man will marry a woman. You're saying, well, you can marry whoever you like. It doesn't have to be a woman anymore. So suddenly we're changing the definition of marriage and we're changing what we're teaching in our schools. Now, what's then happened is we've now gone one step further. So not it's only a matter of, well, we're changing the definition, we're now actually changing what we're promoting in schools. So it's now a matter of we're no longer promoting Christian family values. We're now promoting something which is very different, which are liberal values. So we're now teaching children, you have to know what a lesbian is. You have to know what homosexuality means. You have to say that this relationship is equal with this other relationship. And for Christian children, this is terrible. Is something which Christian parents obviously find extremely difficult to cope with. The way we could handle it is maybe something I can talk about later.
Absolutely. And David, I know as part of Prayer for Parliament that you and your group, and we really value what you're doing, because I'll tell you what, our government needs as much as prayer and intercession as they can get, particularly with Theresa May's government. But if we take, for example, the Prayer for Parliament, now you often go into the Department of Education. What are your findings when you've gone into the Department of Education, and what are your concerns there?
Well, we have a big concern. We pray with the group there, but what is concerning is what's going on in the Education Department, because that's really the hub of what covers all education. We're two things while we're in there. We do pray with their Christian people, and it's very powerful. But within the last time we went there, they've taken over the toilets. Now, I'm just going to show those.
Yeah, just lift it higher.
We've got, that shows two toilets. On the left used to be the male toilet, and on the right used to be the female toilet. Now, it's not an individual one. It says gender-neutral toilet. But in fact, when you go in there, they've got illegal signs, because when you go in there, there are toilets next to each other with a partition gap underneath and at the top. So you can have a man in one cubicle and a female in the other cubicle. Now, my understanding, and I've had it sounded out, is that's totally illegal. So you've got the Ministry of Education with the toilets in the reception area illegal. It's not a single one, which would be okay. And then when you go into the centre of the Ministry of Education, every floor going up inside, because it's a big open area and the offices are all around it, has a rainbow banner right across every single floor, all the way up to the 6th floor. And what you've got is, I believe you've got a minority of people who are controlling. What we need to do is have the silent majority in this nation waking up to what is going on in the education ministry, which feeds out to all the stuff about schooling and teaching 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds about stuff that I don't think they should hear until later on in life. So there's a lot of prayer going on in there, and there's a very powerful prayer team in there already. But we need more intercessors praying over education, praying over that the silent majority would wake up.
Yeah. And Sid, in light of what David has just told us about the what's happening in the Department of Education, which is kind of very concerning, but in light of that, what impact is this very ultra-liberal, militant secularist agenda having on, for example, faith schools that actually have a Christian ethos?
Well, there's a battle underway. And what tends to happen is that you get Ofsted inspectors come round, and the Ofsted inspectors are sold into this agenda, which, as David said, is coming from the education department. And so they're then questioning teachers, and they're questioning head teachers as to how they're promoting this agenda. And if they're not promoting this agenda, then they can be marked down. And a school that can be classified as excellent is suddenly in special measures. They're in special measures because they're not pursuing this liberal agenda. And that's obviously completely wrong, because the standard of education is extremely high. But one of the other results, as you said earlier, is that, interestingly enough, there's increasing number of Christian parents that are actually saying, we're going to homeschool. We've actually completely lost all confidence in the state education system. Therefore, we're going to educate our children at home. There's now over 50,000 children being educated at home by their parents. And this is something which has grown by 80% over the last year. So this is really a vote of no confidence in the whole education system by large numbers of Christian parents.
Absolutely. David, I think probably my generation was probably the last generation in particular to have a kind of very Christian ethos at our schools, with school assembly singing obviously a daily prayer with school assembly and singing hymns. And now, because of the direction our society is going in, a more kind of secular direction, it's actually hard to find these schools. So many children now are growing up not even knowing the gospel, not even knowing the Christmas nativity story. How important is it that really for the next generation to face all the challenges that we face in the world today, to understand the importance that God plays in our society, but also to learn about God and to learn about the mainstream religion of our nation, which is Christianity?
I think it's very important. As I say, we grew up with it in our schools. We knew what the Bible was, and we knew what it was all about. The tragedy is that this generation doesn't. We've got grandchildren who, because our sons haven't come back to the Lord yet, they're sort of doing their own thing. So the grandchildren aren't being given the gospel. And at Christmas, they don't really know. So as grandparents, we do say the odd thing, but our hands are slightly tied because both our sons don't want us talking to our grandchildren about, gospel and other things. So a lot of prayer is going into it. And I think prayer is really the only thing that can get the message through. I mean, Christmas, we know what Christmas is about, the birth of Christ, but it's got so materialistic nowadays that, the present generation probably just thinks, oh, it's present time, don't know really what it's about. Same as Easter, they don't really know what that's about, Easter eggs and bunnies, but it's tragic.
Yeah.
In fact, can I just say this? And today, I mean, I know we're recording this early, but it's Halloween today. It seems to be that more emphasis is put into Halloween than it is at Christmas and in the reality.
Absolutely, which is a very important point. Sid, why are we seeing such a large number of Christians deciding to take education into their own hands by teaching their children themselves and deciding to go for home education rather than the state school system? What ways can the churches play a role in supporting, encouraging Christian children who've decided their parents have decided to pull out of state education?
Well, the church can certainly play a role in giving support to any parents that have decided to homeschool. You see, when parents homeschool, there is no set curriculum, there's no set time that they have to do it, there's no inspections that are taking place. So it's a very fluid situation. And you've got to realise, if you decide to homeschool, you're not stuck in homeschooling for the whole of a child's life. You can decide to start homeschooling a child, or you can take a child out of the state sector if it's just simply not working for them and homeschool them and then go back into the state sector at a later point. You're not tied to that. But any child that's being homeschooled needs support. I mean, the homeschooling is only as good as the tuition they're getting. And parents can obviously work hard and give excellent tuition up to a point. But it's also good, obviously, if there's support and tutors coming in. There are organisations that are there to help and to give support. But the fact that this is happening is absolutely a vote of no confidence in the state sector. And I want Christians to be involved in governing bodies. I want Christians standing to be parent governors, looking to be community governors, and seeking to influence schools through governing bodies. I myself in the past have been a chair of governors of a church school and worked very hard. I was involved in appointing an excellent Christian head of the school I was chair of governors for. And through that process, we maintained the strong Christian ethos in the school. In the end, all the senior teachers were all committed Christians that were appointed into the school. And that process, I would absolutely encourage any church to be involved in. You support your local school, especially if it's a Christian school. Support the school, stand for governing bodies, work hard with the head teacher and other teachers to make sure there's Christianity in the curriculum. One thing that you have to appreciate is that the whole liberal agenda is aimed at crushing Christianity in schools. I mean, one of the key points of the liberal agenda is take Christianity out of schools. And the focus is absolutely on the youngest children. It's actually on the under 10s. So the fact that we're now finding that even 4 and 5-year-olds are being taught homosexuality and taught lesbianism and all this sort of thing is no surprise, because that is part of the liberal agenda. Now, we as Christians have got to counter it. The first way we counter it is by prayer. We need to pray for our children. We need to pray earnestly and contend for our children, because they're being presented with this agenda, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. We haven't got to live in fear of what is going on. We've got to be willing to rise up, confront it in governing bodies, confront it through every way in which we can, so that we can return our schools back to Christian values.
And David, there's been quite a few news reports referring to the fact that many Christian parents are decided to, one of the main reasons why they want to homeschool is because of the fact that many Christians now face bullying because they have different values than the kind of liberal values that are being pushed out through our education system and by the state. In terms of bullying, how do we counter that? Because this is a kind of serious issue, and now Christian pupils are facing a tough time.
I think a lot of parents would go to the head and go to the school and report it. But it's, again, as Sid just said, it's prayer and a lot more prayer, because anything can be answered by prayer, and God will just protect those children. One of the things I wanted to bring up on the homeschool thing is one of the arguments that people put, because I think faith schools, Christian schools are brilliant, but one of the arguments against homeschooling seems to be that the children are more cut off because they're not mixing with other children. And I just wonder what, Sid, you had to say about that.
Well, there is actually some research which is available, which has been done, which shows that homeschool children are very well adjusted. But I think there's been some reports and some evidence from parents who have homeschooled, and they've said, well, our children still relate with other children in football clubs and other clubs, and of course in church as well. So there are lots of forums where they can relate with other children. Obviously that has to be encouraged, but the evidence doesn't show that homeschool children are badly adjusted, quite the opposite.
Yeah. But isn't there a kind of problem in a sense with homeschooling is the fact that the way that modern society is, the way that modern economy is, that if it's both parents need to work, so that becomes a problem of actually then the financial cost then of having one parent stay at home or taking on part-time work in order to teach their children at home. Isn't that one major problem that has to be overcome?
I'm not saying that homeschooling is the answer to all the problems we're facing in education. I'm saying that this phenomenon, and it is a phenomenon with a growth of 80%, is a vote of no confidence in our education system and is something that we need as Christians to respond to. And I think we should respond to it not by encouraging more parents to homeschool. I think that should be a situation that is an option that is there, that Christian parents should use if it's really needed because their children are not engaging well with the state sector. But I think what our response as Christians should be is to say we've got to contend for our schools, we've got to get on school governing bodies, we've got to talk to heads, we've got to look at the curriculum, and we've got to make our case. We've got to make our case indeed with our MPs as well. We've got to make our case in the whole political sphere to stand for moral education, as indeed the Christian Parties Alliance. We stand for moral education in our nation, and that is what we've got to contend for and push through.
And David, the local authorities say that they are concerned with homeschooling on the grounds that there's no one to check if the children are having a good education. There's also this kind of fear that abuse may be going on or neglect, and therefore they can't monitor that, unlike a child going to a state school, for example. So how do Christian parents counter that?
I think they need to make certain that they're doing things absolutely right, and they need to make certain that they're doing all the curriculum, that the kids are doing the exact right number of hours, and just working to the book, because there is a homeschool organisation, and I think, you know, as long as you're sticking to it, again with prayer cover, then I think they'll be all right.
Yeah. Sid, according to a BBC report on this issue, one of the biggest places for homeschooling is actually the Isle of Wight, which is quite surprising, and they blame that down to the poor education on the island. But some of the issues regionally, for example, in Devon, it says that most parents who offered a reason for homeschooling blamed dissatisfied with the school environment. In East Sussex, they say that lack of school choice, unmet special education needs, rigour and limits of the current school curriculum. Gateshead parents felt that some pressure from schools to remove their children, especially if the young person had poor attendance. And in Cambridgeshire, the council said it had an increased support for home education community, extending borrowing rights at libraries. So regionally, it affects regional issues, doesn't it? So is the fact that maybe the answer to these problems that we're facing is faith schools as well, supporting schools that have a very strong Christian ethos and encouraging parents who attend these schools to write to their MPs to say how good this is for their children?
It's not a matter of either or. It's a matter of we want to improve all schools, we want to improve faith schools, and we also want to give support to Christians educating at home. The Liberals hate the idea that there's an increasing number of children being educated at home that are not influenced by their agenda. They hate it. And they're going to say the most extreme things like, oh, children being home educated are in great danger and there's abuse taking place and so on and so forth. There is no evidence whatsoever of children being educated at home being abused in any way, shape or form. That's simply scaremongering. The evidence shows that the education is excellent. But as I've said before, we're not saying that this is the way to go, but we're saying all faith schools need to be supported. Children need to be supported that are being educated at home. And we also need to contend for all the other schools as well by getting onto school governing bodies and seeking to increase Christian influence in schools. It needs to be a holistic package.
Absolutely.
The names that you put out are mainly outside London, I think. Wandsworth is where the borough I live in. And in actual fact, the Christian schools and the faith schools are normally top of the tables. So obviously it's quite clear that they give a better education than the other schools.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't Is there, I don't know so much about the education system. Obviously, if I had children be different attending school, then I would focus a lot more on this, because obviously there's a vested interest. But is there a difference between, say, for example, public education and state education in terms of national curriculum and in terms of Christian emphasis on Christian ethos?
No, all schools now follow the national curriculum, and of course the national curriculum is then borne out by what is tested at GCSEs and at A-levels. So there is and the national curriculum is basically a good thing, because obviously if parents move house, if you're living in the south one day and then you move and you're living in the north, you don't want a situation where a child then has to move school, and in the new school they're taught something completely different from what they were being taught in the school in the south. So it's a good thing to have the national curriculum. But what is wrong is the way in which the Department of Education, and Ofsted in particular, are forcing schools within the national curriculum to teach things that are basically anti-Christian. That is what is wrong, and that is what we have to oppose and contend for at every level in our society.
But do you think the private schools will go about it in a different way from the state schools?
Well, private schools are still being inspected by Ofsted, so they're still getting this pressure to adopt that curriculum. They have more freedom. Church schools have more freedom than other schools. So in that sense, you know, it's good, but there's no guarantee that if you pay to send your child to a private school, that the liberal agenda which is being in state schools won't be in a private school. I'm afraid that isn't automatic by a long chalk.
Yeah, and Dave, this raises a very serious point, and that is the ideology in which our children are being infected with. And surely the point of education is to prepare children for adulthood. So whether that's so they have a good standard of English, they have a good grasp of maths, a good grasp of history, and also I think in the equation as well is the importance of physical education as well, and to recognise and identify where children's skills and talents lie, so that they can be encouraged to use their gifts and talents and find out what they flourish. Me personally, I was always very good at social sciences, but when it came to physical sciences, I didn't flourish there. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't actually enjoy science that much at all growing up when I had my education system. So therefore I did better at history, I did better at kind of politics, all the humanitarian, so humanities issues. It isn't also have to identify that schools need to identify and address different issues in terms of pupils so that they can have the best education possible, and it kind of prepares them for later in life.
Yeah, I think everybody's got it. I mean, we've all got different talents, and I think the schools should try and identify what talent each person has. But the other thing is parents should be involved and encourage their children. The problem is a lot of these children, the parents couldn't care less about it. They're leaving it to the school to really look after and bring their children up in the way that, you know, we'll let the school run it. They know what's best. And a lot of parents are so switched off to their well-being of their kids. I don't mean well-being as far as looking after them at home, but taking an interest in how they're maturing and growing up.
Absolutely. And also what we've seen over the last a couple of decades, isn't it, Sid, is the deterioration of discipline. I remember being at school as well. That was a major problem of why so many children can't actually learn and get decent education because of other disruptive children. Obviously, the advantage of homeschooling is the fact that you don't have that you can have a very concentrated education system and a system of learning where children are actually learned to think outside the box. Isn't this something that we should encourage as well? And also, do you think we need to change the culture within our education system that empowers the teachers rather than actually empowering the pupils?
Well, every pupil will benefit from having one-to-one tuition. There's no shadow of doubt about that. And also, if you've got homeschooling, you can obviously focus your attention more on what a child really wants to learn and what his child is interested in. It's like you say, you were particularly interested in humanities. I was always very good with figures. I mean, maths was always my favourite subject. I then later on in life became a financial advisor for many years because that was then borne out. Now, obviously, if I'd been homeschooled, I could have spent more time in maths and developing something which I was really interested in from an early age. But it's also good, obviously, to have some sort of broad spectrum as well. So to have some understanding of other subjects which you're not particularly good at is also useful. But we need to develop, we need to encourage our children to develop, in a way that they're going to then pursue their vision, their aim in life, and they're going to find in life what they really are called to do, because everyone's called to do different things. And schools should be encouraging every child within the classroom to pursue what they're really keen on and what they really want to do in life, to see what their vision is and to pursue their vision. Yeah.
And David, for Christian parents, how should they pray for their child at school so that they can maintain their kind of Christian faith in what is now become an increasingly challenging education system facing so many of our Christian children in British schools?
I think they just have to pray over the protection for their children. They have to pray that their children would have favour with the staff, but it's also good to pray over the school, pray over their other children at the school, pray for the teaching staff, Absolutely. That they have wisdom and discernment. Really, and every school will be different, so there will be different things to pray over. But I think it was also good if the parents can get involved with, a lot of schools have parent meetings or there are clubs where, the teachers, the parents can meet up. So every school's different. Just keep praying over.
Absolutely. And in 30 seconds, Sid, how important is it that we all play a role to defend our Christian ethos at our schools and our education system, and particularly in the national curriculum?
Children are absolutely central to what God wants to do within our nation. I mean, Jesus said, let the children come to me and don't hinder them. He also says, if anyone causes one of these children who believes in me to sin, then he should be better if he would have a stone put around his neck and he was drowned in the depths of the sea. Children are extremely important to God and extremely important to what he wants to do within us and within our nation.
Sid, David, thank you so much for joining me for this edition of Politics Today, and I just want to thank you all for watching this programme. It's important that we keep our children in prayer, that we keep our the Department of Education also in prayer, and that we stand up for our Christian values in our education system. So thank you for watching Politics Today.